In the quiet farmlands of Arkansas, a modern conflict was brewing, not over land, but over chemicals drifting from one field to another. Mike Wallace planted soybeans not engineered to resist dicamba, while his neighbour Alan Curtis used resistant seeds and sprayed the herbicide. The wind carried dicamba onto Wallace's crops, killing them and fueling a bitter feud. This wasn't an isolated incident. It was happening across the heartland, dividing farmers by the seeds they planted. On an October day in 2016, the conflict turned deadly. Curtis shot and killed Wallace after another argument over herbicide drift. This tragedy was the result of a new kind of agriculture, shaped by distant corporations and powerful chemicals. To understand how a weed killer could lead to murder, we need to look back at the origins of these chemicals and the company behind them. This is the story of Monsanto, a company whose inventions transform farming, communities, and our relationship with the land. Over the next hour, we'll uncover how scientific breakthroughs, corporate power, and hidden costs change the way we feed ourselves. This is not just the story of one company, but a reflection on the power corporations wield and the consequences that follow. Our story begins in a World War II laboratory, where scientists sought ways to disrupt enemy food supplies. They discovered 2,4-D, a chemical that killed broadleaf weeds but spared crops like wheat and corn. This breakthrough promised higher yields and less labour, revolutionising agriculture. Monsanto quickly began manufacturing and marketing these selective herbicides as miracles of modern science. Farmers embraced them, and chemical agriculture took off. But the manufacturing process created toxic byproducts, dioxins, whose dangers were unknown at the time. These contaminants were dismissed as minor impurities, but their effects would soon become impossible to ignore. The promise of chemical control over nature came with a hidden cost. The era of industrial farming had begun, but so had a new era of risk. The miracle in the fields was carrying a silent, invisible passenger. The consequences of this discovery would soon reach far beyond the laboratory, and Monsanto would be at the centre of it all. In Nitro, West Virginia, Monsanto's chemical plant was the town's lifeblood, until disaster struck in 1949. An explosion released a cloud of toxic fumes, leaving workers with severe skin lesions and chronic pain. Monsanto blamed the herbicide, but internally they knew dioxin was the real culprit, an exceptionally toxic contaminant. The company kept this secret, leaving workers and residents in the dark. Contaminated equipment was buried nearby, and dioxin seeped into the soil and water. For decades, Nitro's people lived with invisible poison, unaware of the long-term health risks. This event set a pattern. When faced with evidence of harm, Monsanto chose secrecy over safety. The Nitro disaster was a warning ignored, a rehearsal for even greater tragedies to come. The poison did not disappear. It spread quietly, shaping the fate of a community. Monsanto's response would echo through history. The next chapter would unfold on a global stage. During the Vietnam War, the U.S. military turned to chemicals to strip away jungle cover and destroy enemy crops. The main weapon agent Orange, a mix of herbicides produced by Monsanto and others, contaminated with dangerous levels of dioxin. Millions of gallons were sprayed over Vietnam, devastating forests, farms, and entire ecosystems. The chemical rain fell on soldiers and civilians alike, contaminating food and water. The effects were slow to appear. Birth defects, cancers, and chronic illnesses haunted generations. The American military claimed the chemicals were safe, but the truth emerged too late. Agent Orange's legacy is a permanent scar on Vietnam and its people. The poison outlasted the war, continuing to harm long after the last plane flew. Monsanto's chemicals had become weapons of lasting destruction. In the 1970s, Monsanto chemist John Franz discovered glyphosate, a molecule that killed nearly all plants by blocking a vital enzyme. Because this enzyme didn't exist in animals, Monsanto marketed glyphosate, branded as Roundup, as safe for people and wildlife. Roundup was hailed as a revolutionary broad-spectrum herbicide, quickly becoming the world's best-seller. But its power was also its limitation. It killed crops as easily as weeds. Monsanto's breakthrough came with genetic engineering. What if crops could be made immune to Roundup? The company invested heavily in biotechnology, aiming to create seeds that could survive their own herbicide. This would allow farmers to spray entire fields, killing weeds but sparing crops. The vision, a closed system where Monsanto sold both the seed and the chemical. The potential for profit and control was enormous. The stage was set for a new era in agriculture. Monsanto was about to change farming forever. In the 1980s, Monsanto scientists isolated a gene from bacteria that made plants resistant to glyphosate. By 1996, Roundup-ready soybeans hit the market, letting farmers spray fields without harming their crops. Adoption was rapid. Farmers loved the simplicity and efficiency. But there was a catch. Monsanto's seeds were patented, and farmers had to sign agreements not to save or replant them. Each year they had to buy new seeds, turning a centuries-old farming tradition into a rental system. Monsanto now controlled both the seed and the chemical, locking farmers into their system. The company's influence grew as more infrastructure and markets adapted to genetically modified crops. Leaving the system became nearly impossible for many farmers. The seed, once a symbol of independence, was now a tool of corporate control. Monsanto had become the master of the modern harvest. The balance of power in agriculture had shifted. The consequences would ripple through rural communities. Farming would never be the same. With patents and contracts in place, Monsanto enforced its control aggressively. The company created a seed police to investigate and sue farmers suspected of saving seeds, even if contamination was accidental. Hotlines encouraged neighbours to report on each other, sowing distrust in rural communities. Legal threats and costly settlements silenced many farmers who feared financial ruin. The case of Percy Schmeiser, a Canadian farmer sued over unwanted GM canola, became a symbol of the struggle. The courts sided with Monsanto, even when farmers hadn't sought out the technology. Fear replaced camaraderie. The fields became battlegrounds of suspicion. Monsanto's reach extended beyond crops. It reshaped the social fabric of farming life. The cost of control was measured in more than dollars. For years, Monsanto insisted glyphosate was safe, citing its own studies and regulatory approvals. That narrative collapsed in 2015 when the World Health Organization classified glyphosate as probably carcinogenic. Lawsuits poured in from people with cancer who had used Roundup for years. Legal discovery revealed the Monsanto Papers, internal documents showing the company ghostwrote studies, attacked critics, and influenced regulators. The evidence exposed a campaign to protect profits at the expense of public health. Juries awarded massive damages to victims, finding Monsanto acted with malice. The company's credibility was shattered. The truth, hidden for decades, was finally exposed. The image of Roundup as a safe tool was gone. The cost of deception was now public. Facing lawsuits and a ruined reputation, Monsanto was acquired by Bayer in 2018. Its name retired, but its legacy enduring. Billions were set aside to settle claims from those harmed by Roundup. Meanwhile, overuse of glyphosate led to superweeds, forcing farmers to use more chemicals, including dicamba, the herbicide at the heart of the Arkansas tragedy. The cycle of chemical dependence and resistance escalated, creating new risks for health and the environment. Monsanto's story is a warning about the power of corporations to shape science, policy, and daily life. It's a tale of profit over precaution and of technology used to control rather than empower. The fields of Arkansas, the jungles of Vietnam, and courtrooms worldwide are all linked by this legacy. As we look ahead, we must ask, what is our relationship with nature? What role should corporations play in our food and our future? The legacy of Monsanto is not just chemicals and seeds, but a challenge to our values and vigilance. The simplest solutions, it turns out, can carry the most complex costs.